Imagine a lonely cabin on the edge of the Wyoming frontier, where the wind howls like a widow's lament and the sunsets bleed crimson over the snow-dusted plains. It's 1872, 4 years after the guns of the Civil War fell silent, but the scars of that conflict still linger in the hearts of men. Elias Harrow stands at his window, a man carved from sorrow, his grizzled beard streaked with silver, his blue eyes hollowed by 47 winters of loss. He's a widower, a former Union medic who fled west after burying his beloved Clara beneath a gnarled oak by the creek, a tree that droops as if it mourns her too. 3 years ago, she slipped away in the fevered grip of cholera, taking their unborn son with her. Since then, Elias has lived in a silence thicker than the frost on his window panes. The cabin whispers her memory. Her embroidered shawl drapes over a rocking chair he won't touch. Her rosemary bundles hang brittle and forgotten on the wall, and the bed stays half empty, as if waiting for a ghost. Elias is a shadow of the man he once was, known in the nearby settlement of Redstone as the Hermit of the Ridge. He rides into town once a month, his canvas duster flapping like a raven's wings, trading pelts for flour and coffee, speaking only in grunts. Some whisper he's gone mad with grief, others swear he's cursed, that the land itself rejects him. No crops grow, no laughter echoes. But on this bitter February night, as the sky bruises into darkness, fate knocks at his door with a sound that isn't the wind, a faint, desperate scratching, like a wounded animal clawing for life. He grabs his old Spencer carbine, more instinct than fear, and steps into the biting cold. There, beneath the skeletal branches of a pine near his lean-to, lies a young Cheyenne woman, her body curled tight against the blizzard's wrath. Her buckskin dress is tattered, the beaded fringe torn, and a crimson stain blooms from her shoulder to her wrist, stark against her frost-pale skin. Her feet are bare, her raven hair matted with snow, and she's still as a fallen doe, her breath a shallow whisper against the storm. Elias freezes, his heart thundering. He hasn't seen a Cheyenne this close since the Army's campaigns drove them north. She's young, maybe 19, her face etched with defiance even in collapse. For a moment, he wonders if she's a vision, a ghost sent to haunt him. But then her eyelids flutter, and he knows she's real. He lowers the rifle, his hands trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of a choice. He doesn't ask her name. He doesn't demand her story. He simply kneels, gathers her into his arms, her body lighter than the guilt he carries, and brings her inside. She smells of sage and frozen rivers, and as he crosses the threshold, it's as if the storm itself has entered his home. He lays her by the hearth, the firelight dancing on her sharp cheekbones, and wraps her in a wool blanket that hasn't touched skin since Clara's passing. She stirs, her lips cracked and bloodless, murmuring in Cheyenne, a language he doesn't know, but feels like a prayer in his bones. He fetches a tin basin of warm water, his hands steady from years of stitching soldiers' wounds, and cleans the gash on her arm. It's deep, a jagged tear from a blade or a fall, but not fatal. He threads a needle with horsehair, his movements mechanical, and stitches her up as she watches him with fever-bright eyes, flinching only once. No words pass between them, just the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. When he's done, Elias steps into the night to wash the blood from his hands, the icy snow biting his knuckles. The moon hangs low, a sickle of light casting shadows that stretch like skeletal fingers across the plains. He stares at the pine tree, remembering how Clara loved to sit beneath it, her laughter bright as the wild lupines she'd weave into her hair. Those flowers never returned after her death, as if the earth mourned her too. Back inside, the girl has curled closer to the fire, asleep now, her breathing ragged but steady. Elias sits in his chair, the one Clara used to rock in while humming Irish lullabies, and watches the flames. He tells himself she'll leave at dawn. He tells himself he wants her to. But deep down, in the hollow where his heart used to be, something stirs a flicker of warmth he thought he'd buried with his wife. Morning comes, gray and heavy with more snow. The girl wakes before the sun, her body tensing like a cornered fox. Elias sets a tin plate beside her hardtack and a strip of smoked venison. She snatches it with a feral quickness, her eyes darting to him, then away. He sits at the table with his black coffee, the steam rising like a ghost between them. Her gaze meets his, and there's no gratitude, no fear, just a wary stillness, like two wolves circling each other in the wild. "You're safe here," he says, his voice gravelly from disuse. "For now." She doesn't answer, but she doesn't bolt either. The snow falls thicker, blanketing the world in silence. Elias tends to his chores, feeding the two sway-backed horses in the lean-to, breaking ice in the trough, checking the fence posts bowed under the storm's weight. When he returns, the hearth is swept, the blanket folded, and she's staring at the pantry with a hunger that's more than physical. That night, he makes a thin stew beans, salt pork, a few shriveled carrots from his root cellar. She eats with a deliberate grace, her movements almost sacred. But he notices she favors one side of her mouth. A bruise blooms beneath her jaw, purple against her copper skin. A silent story of violence she doesn't share. He doesn't ask. She doesn't tell. The storm rages on, the wind screaming like a banshee through the chimney. Elias gives her the bed, a straw mattress with a patched quilt, and takes the chair for himself. "It's warmer," he mutters, more to himself than to her. "You need it. It's not charity, it's survival." But at midnight, he wakes to find her at the window, her silhouette sharp against the firelight, her eyes scanning the endless white for something or someone. He stands, his shadow looming on the wall. "Trouble on its way?" he asks, his voice low. She turns, her gaze piercing through him, and after a long, brittle silence, she nods once. Elias has known trouble before battlefields soaked in blood, winters that starved entire towns, the slow death of his own heart. But this feels different, heavier, like a stone sinking into a frozen river. He pulls a second blanket from the trunk. "Stay tonight," he says. "We'll sort it out at dawn." She doesn't trust him not yet, but the fear in her eyes has dulled to something else. Something like resignation. He settles back into the chair, the fire's glow painting his weathered face, and listens to the storm rage on. For the first time in years, the silence doesn't feel like a shroud. Dawn breaks, pale as a mourner's veil, and Elias steps outside to feed the horses. The snow is a pristine sheet, untouched for weeks until now. His breath catches as he sees them hoof prints, dozens of them circling the cabin like a hangman's rope. He looks to the ridge, and there they are, riders. At least 60, maybe 70. their faces painted with ochre and soot, their lances catching the first light like fire. Cheyenne warriors. His gut twists not with fear, but with a cold inevitability. He turns back to the cabin. Inside, the girl stands by the fire, her eyes wide but unsurprised, as if she's been waiting for this moment all along. They don't speak, but in the stillness, a bond forms a silent pact that neither will run. Not anymore. The morning light cuts sharp across the plains, the air so cold it burns to breathe. Elias stands on the porch, a tin mug of cold coffee in one hand, his other gripping the railing. He's lived on this land long enough to know when it holds its breath when the crows don't caw, when the rabbits don't stir, when the wind itself seems to pause. Then he sees it a shimmer on the horizon, a ripple of dust and shadow. The sound follows, a low rumble of hooves, steady as a war drum. He sets the mug down with a deliberate slowness, as if any sudden move might shatter the world. He walks back to the cabin, his boots crunching on the icy snow, his heart pounding a rhythm he hasn't felt since the war. Inside, the girl stands ready, her arm bandaged with a strip of Clara's old petticoat, her hair braided tight against her scalp, a beaded belt cinched around her waist. She's not afraid, she's prepared. "They're here," Elias says, his voice steady but heavy. She looks up, her dark eyes distant, like she's seeing beyond the walls. He reaches for the carbine above the door, but stops, his hand hovering. A gun won't save him now. He steps outside, and she follows. Her moccasins, ones she'd stitched from his leather scraps, silent on the boards. The riders crest the ridge, a wave of muscle and purpose, their horses snorting steam into the frigid air. There are 70 of them, their buffalo hide cloaks dusted with snow, their faces streaked with war paint, red slashes like blood, black lines like grief. At their head is a man whose presence commands the earth itself. Chief Black Elk, his cloak made of bear fur, his gray-streaked hair adorned with eagle feathers, his eyes burning with a father's fury and a leader's resolve. His horse, a black stallion, paws the ground, its mane braided with red beads that clink like bones. Black Elk halts a dozen yards from the cabin, his warriors fanning out in a crescent moon behind him, surrounding the homestead without a single raised lance. The silence is deafening, broken only by the creak of leather and the snorts of horses. The girl steps forward, her chin high. "Father," she says, her voice clear as a bell in the frozen air. Black Elk's gaze rakes over her, then lands on Elias, pinning him like a hawk pins a hare. Elias stands firm, his hands loose at his sides, his faded union coat flapping in the wind. He doesn't speak, there's no point in words when the truth is written in the snow. Black Elk dismounts, his boots sinking into the drifts, and strides forward with the weight of a man who's buried sons and led wars. He stops close enough for Elias to smell the sage on his cloak, close enough to see the scars on his knuckles. The girl steps between them, her voice soft but unyielding. "I chose not to go back," she says. "The warriors don't stir. Neither does Elias." Black Elk's eyes, black as coal, shift between his daughter and the man beside her. "She walked into death," he says, his voice a low growl. "And you pulled her back." "I didn't pull her anywhere," Elias replies, his words rough but steady. "She walked herself." Black Elk studies him, his gaze peeling back layers of grief to find the man beneath. Then he raises a hand, and for a heartbeat. Elias braces for a blow, but Black Elk only touches his daughter's cheek, a father's tenderness in the gesture. "You're no child," he says to her, "but I still thought to choose for you." She doesn't flinch. "I didn't run from you. Father, I ran from men who took what wasn't theirs, who burned through our camp like a plague." Black Elk's gaze drifts to the horizon, where the ghosts of broken treaties and stolen lives linger. He turns back to Elias. "My warriors won't strike today," he says. Relief flickers in the girl's eyes, but Elias hears the unspoken threat. "But they'll return." Black Elk adds, "Not in peace. You have 3 days. Then I come as a chief, not a father." He mounts his horse with a grace that defies his years, and the warriors turn as one, their horses moving like a river flowing back to the hills. In moments, they're gone, leaving only hoof prints and a promise hanging in the air. Elias watches until the last rider disappears, then lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Inside, the cabin is cold, the fire reduced to embers. He throws on more logs, the flames flaring like a warning. The girl whose name he still doesn't know sits on the bed, her face a mask of unreadable emotion. "You should have gone with them," he says, his tone gruff but not unkind. She looks up, her eyes fierce. To what? To silence? To a marriage with a man who'd trade me for peace? "You don't have answers," she says. Softer now. "You gave me a door I could walk through. That's enough." He turns to the fire, avoiding her gaze, because looking at her too long stirs something he can't name. A longing he thought died with Clara. 3 days. The words echo like a death knell. That night, the wind screams through the eaves, and Elias sits by the window, a mug of cold coffee in hand, his mind drifting to memories he's long buried: Clara's laughter, the weight of his son in his arms, a life that slipped through his fingers like sand. Across the room, the girl weaves a strip of leather into a bracelet, her fingers deft and sure, as if she's weaving her own story into existence. He watches her from the corner of his eye, marveling at her resilience. Why her "we" now? She catches his gaze, her expression unyielding. "You didn't fear them," she says. "No. Why, I've lost what most men fear to lose." She nods, understanding. "I haven't. But I've come close." The fire snaps, and outside, a coyote howls, its cry swallowed by the storm. "I won't ask you to keep me," she whispers. "But I won't leave unless you make me." He looks at her, really looks at her. She's not Clara, with her softness and light. She's a wildfire, fierce and untamed, her roots digging into scorched earth. He doesn't tell her to go. He doesn't tell her to stay. He just adds another log to the fire, and she returns to her weaving, the world holding its breath for what's next. The next morning dawns pale and heavy, the snow softening under a weak sun. Elias keeps busy chopping wood, mending a bridle, checking the horses, his hands moving while his mind races. 2 days left. The girl moves through the cabin like a quiet spirit, her presence a balm he didn't know he needed. She sweeps the floor, washes the tin mugs, folds the quilt, and after dusk, stacks firewood with a strength that belies her slender frame. They speak little, but their silence has shifted. It's no longer a barrier, but a shared space, a sanctuary they've built together. She asks about Clara, her voice soft but deliberate. Her name was Clara, Elias says, the words tasting of dust and memory. She doesn't press, but later. He notices she's folded Clara's shawl and placed it on the trunk, taking a plain wool blanket instead, a quiet respect for the past. He watches her more now, not with desire, but with a growing awe. She's younger than her eyes suggest, her silence not empty, but full of stories she hasn't told. She has Clara's way with animals head tilted, listening to their unspoken language. One morning, he finds her outside, coaxing a skittish mare with a handful of dried apples, the horse nuzzling her palm like an old friend. Later, he gives her a piece of elk hide, soft and dark. "Thought you might use this," he says gruffly. She takes it, her fingers brushing his, and whispers, "Thank you." The words carry a weight that makes his chest ache. That evening, they sit by the fire, closer now, the air between them charged with something new. She hums a Cheyenne lullaby, the melody weaving through the crackle of the flames like a thread of silver. He doesn't ask what it means, he doesn't need to. Instead, he talks, his voice halting at first, then steady. He tells her he was a medic in the war, stitching boys back together while cannon fire roared. How he came west for the silence, not the gold. She listens, her silence a gift, and he realizes he's never felt so heard. One evening, he rides into Redstone for supplies. The girl's presence a secret he carries like a talisman. The storekeeper, Mrs. Abigail Harrow, no relation. Just a cruel twist of fate eyes him suspiciously as he buys calico fabric and a tin of tea. "Got a guest. Elias," she asks, her tone sharp as a blade. "A traveler," he says, her eyes narrow. "A Cheyenne girl, I hear. They bring trouble, you know." He pays and leaves, the calico tucked under his arm like a promise. That night, he lays the fabric on the table, and the girl touches it with a reverence that makes his throat tighten. By morning, she's sewing it into a dress, her needle flashing in the firelight, her focus a kind of prayer. But her eyes keep darting to the window, and Elias knows she's waiting. "You think they'll come early?" he says. She nods. They won't wait. He doesn't ask if she's scared, he can see she's not. That afternoon, as storm clouds gather low, Elias rides to the canyon's edge, scanning the trail for signs. The air is heavy, the silence before a storm, and he feels the weight of what's coming. When he returns, the cabin smells of stew she's cooked with what he brought. A simple meal that feels like a sacrament. They eat together, the table a bridge between them, and for the first time, it feels like family. Later, he stands by the hearth, the fire casting shadows on his face. She stands behind him, her voice soft. "I dreamed of my mother last night," she says. "She was braiding my hair by the river. I haven't seen her face in years." He turns slightly. "She's gone, fever took her." "No medicine." His heart clenches. "You remind me of her," she says. "You listen like she did, like the silence matters." He doesn't know how to answer, so he says, "You're not what I expected." "Nor you," she replies, and the air between them hums with possibility. The next day, he teaches her to mend a harness, his hands guiding hers over the leather. She shows him a Cheyenne knot, her fingers quick and sure, and they work side by side in the yard, the wind tugging at their hair. It feels like building something a life, a language. That night, she braids his horse's mane, her voice a soft hum, and when she catches him watching, she smiles a small, radiant curve that shatters the ice around his heart. They sit by the fire longer, her head resting on the arm of his chair, her hair brushing his hand. He doesn't pull away. He wants to tell her he's dreaming again of Clara. Yes, but also of her, of a future he thought he'd lost. But he doesn't. Not yet. Morning brings fresh tracks in the snow closer now, a tightening noose. Elias watches her from the porch as she stands by the pine, her hand on its bark, her eyes closed in a silent farewell. "They'll take you, won't they?" he asks when she returns. "They'll try. I could go with you, get you past the ridge." She shakes her head. "Running makes it worse. They'll think you stole me." His jaw tightens. "And if I tell them the truth? They won't believe you? You're not one of them." "I'm not one of us." He looks at her, the fire roaring behind him. "Then what are we?" Her eyes, dark and wounded, hold a tender fire. Maybe we're the space between. That night, the storm returns no snow, but a dry, howling wind that rattles the cabin like a beast. They sit close, knees brushing, breaths mingling with the firelight. He tells her about his son, the tiny grave under the oak, the name he couldn't give because it hurt too much to believe. She takes his hand, her touch rough but warm. "He lived," she says, "even if only in your dreams." He can't speak. He wants to kiss her. But the moment asks for closeness, not passion. In the dark, he whispers, "What's your name?" "Singing Bird," she says, the words a melody on her tongue. "It fits you," he murmurs, and she breathes in sharp, like it's the first time she's heard it in years. The final morning dawns with a sky like ash, the air taut as a bowstring. Elias stands on the porch, a blanket around his shoulders, his eyes on the horizon. The Cheyenne will come today, he feels it in his bones. Singing Bird moves with purpose inside, her hair braided tight, her new calico dress cinched with her beaded belt. She's not waiting to be saved, she's ready to fight for her freedom. They share a silent breakfast, the air thick with what's unsaid, both trying to hold on to this fragile piece before it shatters. She breaks the silence. "They want me back not just as a daughter, but as a symbol. I ran from a marriage, from a treaty I didn't agree to. You don't belong to anyone," Elias says, his voice fierce. Her eyes meet his, steady and sure. They don't see it that way. A woman sheltered is a woman claimed. "They'll think you took me." Then we tell them the truth. They won't listen. We'll make them. By noon, the storm breaks, the wind whipping dust into a frenzy. The ground trembles with the thunder of hooves. Elias steps outside, leaving the carbine behind. This isn't a fight he can win with steel. The riders come in a straight line, a wall of warriors in buffalo hides, their faces painted with the colors of war. Black Elk rides at the center, his bear cloak billowing like a storm cloud, his eyes locked on Singing Bird as she steps out beside Elias. She stands tall, her chin high, her presence a challenge. Black Elk raises a hand, and the warriors dismount, their silence heavier than the storm. "Your days are up," Black Elk says, his voice like rolling thunder. She returns. "She's not yours to take," Elias counters, his words sharp as flint. "She's my daughter." Black Elk growls. That's a bond, not a chain. And when a bond breaks, something dies. Singing Bird steps forward, her voice clear and unyielding. then let it die. If it's built on my silence, it's already dead. A murmur ripples through the warriors, a ripple of shock. Black Elk's jaw clenches. You speak like one who's forgotten her blood. I speak like one who's seen blood spill for nothing. Black Elk steps closer, his gaze boring into her. You'd stay with a man who doesn't know our ways, who can't honor our ancestors, who will never walk our path. I'd stay with a man who sees me as I am, she says, not as what he needs me to be. Black Elk turns to Elias, father and widower locked in a silent battle. You took her, he says. I opened a door, Elias replies. She walked through. You love her. The words hang heavy. A truth Elias hasn't dared name. He looks at Singing Bird, then back at Black Elk. I've lost all I loved. But I wouldn't keep her unless she chose to stay. Black Elk's gaze softens, just a fraction, as if he hears the grief beneath the words. He draws a ceremonial knife from his belt, its bone handle carved with ancient symbols, and holds it out not a threat, but a test. A man doesn't claim a daughter, he says. He proves he can carry her weight with honor. Hunt with me. One elk. One path. If you falter, I'll know you're unworthy. Elias hesitates, then nods. Singing Bird touches his arm, her grip steady, her eyes saying what words can't. The men ride out together, chief and rancher, into the hills, where the sagebrush grows thick and the wind howls like a mourner. They find an elk, a stag with antlers like a crown, its eyes wide with instinct. Black Elk gestures for Elias to take the shot. Elias draws the bow Singing Bird restrung, his hands steady as they were on the battlefield, and looses an arrow that strikes true, clean through the heart. They return with the elk as the rain begins to fall, a gentle weeping from the sky. The warriors wait, their faces stone. Black Elk dismounts and stands before Elias. You don't speak our tongue, he says, but your actions speak true. He turns to Singing Bird. You're no longer my shadow, he says, but you'll always be my heart. He presses 2 fingers to her forehead, a father's farewell, then mounts and leads his warriors away. No blood is spilled, only rain falls, washing the hoofprints into the earth. Elias and Singing Bird stand alone, the storm's tears mingling with their own. They return to the cabin, her dress soaked, his coat dripping. She wraps herself in Clara's shawl, now hers, and he hangs his coat to dry. The fire roars back to life, its warmth a promise. She steps close, her hands bare, her eyes soft with ache. You didn't falter, she says. I didn't know I could choose. I was ready to go. I would have let you, he says, his voice breaking. She steps closer, and he lets her. I want to stay, she whispers. He touches her cheek, her skin warm beneath the rain. Then stay, he says. The words a vow. She kisses him then, a kiss that binds them, not with chains, but with trust, a kiss that feels like coming home. Days turn to weeks, and they build a life from the ashes of their pasts. She carves bone into beads, her hands telling stories in each stroke. He fixes the fence, her laughter echoing as they work side by side. He teaches her to shoot his carbine. She teaches him to track deer by the stars. Redstone softens to them misses. Abigail sets aside fabric for Singing Bird. A boy from a nearby homestead learns her Cheyenne knots. One evening, Elias sits by the fire, carving a cradle not for the son he lost, but for the child growing in Singing Bird's belly. She watches, her hands on her swollen belly, her smile a sunrise. "You're lighter now," she says, "like your shadows lifted." He smiles, a rare, warm thing, because I'm not carrying it alone. But the story doesn't end there. On a quiet spring morning, as the first lupines bloom by the oak, a lone rider appears on the ridge, not Black Elk, but a young Cheyenne warrior, his face painted with grief. He carries a bundle wrapped in doeskin, his eyes haunted. "Singing Bird," he calls, his voice breaking. "Your father fell in a raid. White soldiers ambushed us at the river. He died with your name on his lips." He hands her the bundle Black Elk's bear cloak, stained with blood, and a small pouch of sage, her mother's. Singing Bird takes it, her knees buckling, and Elias catches her as she weeps, the past crashing into their fragile peace. She clutches the cloak, her sobs echoing through the cabin, and Elias holds her, knowing some storms never truly pass. As the rider disappears into the horizon, a single lupine petal falls from the oak, carried by the wind, a reminder that love, like grief, leaves its mark on the earth.